Well, well, first of all, who are these things? We can, be good scientists and make a list of the possibilities and then see which seems more likely. They could be a disincarnate race of hyperdimensional dwellers who live in some kind of parallel continuum just over some kind of energy barrier, and they're there all the time. You do have the feeling that they're there all the time, that it's ongoing, that you have just cut into their scene. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is that behind all these psychedelics, and especially DMT, that this is not a drug at all, but it is essentially a pay telephone of some sort to aliens, good old National Enquirer type aliens who are using this as a communication domain. Say, we can't land on the White House lawn. That would create panic and hysteria. So let's create a drug, which inside the drug we will be able to deal with people. And I was hoping that John Mack, who's an expert on UFO abductions, would be here this weekend. I expected him because I think this whole abduction thing is not going to be illuminated until they start giving abductees DMT and saying, so is this what happened to you? Was it like this, or was it completely different? Well, so then those are the two possibilities that I sort of dealt with over the first 10 or 15 years of thinking about this. And then recently...
Just 1 second. So possibly that experience that people are interpreting as an abduction is just the hyperproduction of endogenous DMT within the brain.
It could be. What puzzles me is that the abduction thing is so non-psychedelic. It's so cut and dried. And all this anal examination stuff with strange machinery, there's nothing comparable to that, I'm happy to report to you, going on in the DMT thing. But it may be, you see...
The way their filter explains what they've done.
Well, I'd be interested in looking at the possibility that DMT, under normal or abnormal conditions, could be sequestered in the human brain, and then some unusual stimulus or stress could cause it to suddenly be dumped, and
I want to share that there have been some migraines that I've had where, what you just described about the colors coming in and the chrysanthemums happened, and it's been so fascinating. I've completely forgotten about the pain about it and just watched it for hours. Well, until I guess I fell asleep, but it sort of struck a note, and I was always under a lot of stress when I got the headache in the first place, and there seemed to be a lot of brain things going on with the migraine in the first place. So I'm wondering if that's...
Yeah, that's an interesting possibility. I also have migraines, or the kind called cluster headaches. And yes, a lot of the nice thing about DMT is that it's painless, but the sense of being split open and of the traveling scotomata, as they call these hallucinations that migraine people see, it's related in some way, yeah.
May I bring science into this a little bit?
Sure.
It involves this principle that is characterized or called phasing, but its basis is sort of what happens on a subatomic level between matter and energy. Turns out there's no fundamental particle. At that level, you have this dance between matter and energy. Energy coalesces into a bit of matter, which then becomes energy. And you can look at this matter-energy relationship as having a wavelength or frequency associated with it. Now, granted, this happens on a subatomic level, but if there's something comparable going on a level at which we seem to exist in the physical form, and it seems to me that there has to be something akin to it, that it may be that we as beings are sort of tuned to a frequency range, in this particular form, and that somehow it's possible to shift that or expand it so that what we're actually experiencing is a broader range of frequencies, or sort of a shift in wavelength. And I think some of these experiences can be at least explored, in that context. there's so much that we don't know.
Ain't that the
nature
truth?
Of this cosmos that, but we can take, we can extrapolate to some degree. At least we can use this to take journeys and explore possibility from what we do know in science, for example, what happens in a subatomic or on a quantum level. I mean, for God's sake, the language of these people is sounding more like sorcerers these days than science.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we do seem to at least believe from the evidence that we see that there is this matter-energy interchange on a very fundamental level. Now, if something akin to that is going on a macro level, there may be this principle of phasing in which we either shift our tuning or we expand it to include a larger spectrum.
Yeah, I think that that's a very interesting avenue to pursue, this thing about frequency. Somebody told me one of the great things about this job is you hear a lot of weird stories. And somebody told me a story recently about, it didn't involve DMT, it involved LSD, but this guy and a friend of his took a quite large dose of LSD, larger than they intended, and they went to a party. And they were so loaded by the time they got to the party that they realized they could not function as partygoers. So they just moved into a corner and sat with their backs to the wall and watched this party rage in front of them. And after about 20 minutes of sitting there, they both simultaneously noticed, it was a dance party, noticed that the music was sounding really strange and everybody was moving very slowly. And as they watched, the thing came to an absolute halt, and people were just frozen, and there was absolute silence. And at that point, the door at the other end of the room swung open, and an elf entered the room and moved among all these frozen people, and then left by the door he came in. And they both saw this, and they said that they could tell that it was, that the people in the room didn't know it happened, because for them it occupied a microsecond. But this thing that was, in Carlos Castaneda, who God knows is not the world's most reliable reporter on these things, nevertheless, there is this thing about stopping the world. So maybe it's something like that, that there is, as you suggest, a frequency phase. Yeah. This sort of leads into the third possibility having to do with the origin of these things. And in a sense, this is the hardest one to swallow, but in another sense, this is the most conservative, in some crazy notion of conservative, the most conservative explanation. Because, yeah. Because we have no evidence other than the tabloids that this world is being visited by friendly visitors from Zenebel-Ganubi or Zeta Reticuli or the Pleiades or anywhere else. I mean, to my mind, the evidence that this is happening is vanishingly small and totally underwhelming. The other possibility that there's some kind of parallel dimension in which these things exist is also somewhat poorly supported. If we're talking about something which thinks, something which can communicate, something which is intelligent, then we should look to ourselves as the source of it, because we are the only intelligent communicating things we know within a certain narrow definition of these things. So that it's occurred to me with greater and greater force, and largely prompted by giving DMT occasionally to Tibetans and Amazonian shamans. And when you say to them, to the shamans in the Amazon, when you say to them, what is happening with this stuff, and what are those little things in there, they say, oh, well, those are ancestor spirits. Didn't you know? Haven't you heard? Shamanism is about doing healing through the intercession of ancestor spirits. Say, ancestor spirits.